Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. If you're tuning in live with us here, a big hello to you. Also, if you're watching the recording, of course, a big hello to you as well. If you are watching this live, do be aware that we would love to have a conversation with you, and you are in the right place. This is GitOps Principles, Practices and Surprises. My name is Matt Allford. I'm joined here today by Amit. We'll get into some introductions soon, but yes, please do send through your questions or comments or interact with us however you like, just through the comment section on whatever platform that you're watching this on. Before we get into the content, I just need 60 seconds of attention. We'll just do a quick couple of housekeeping things and then we can get straight into it. So you've obviously found us here on this webinar. If you're interested in what we do at Octopus Deploy, we do have a site here, octopus.com/webinars, where you can see all of the upcoming webinars that we've got. We've got some here on Argo CD anti-patterns actually, and if you're here watching this GitOps one, you're probably very interested in some of those Argo CD anti-patterns, and Costas is one of the best people in the world to learn some of those things from as well. We do also have a newsletter where we will usually hit your inbox just once a month with all of the latest news, events, and opinions here from Octopus Deploy. Just a first name, last name, and email address is all we need. And if you're not aware, we do have a public roadmap of all of the things that we've got going on in Octopus Deploy as well. So here you can see things that are under consideration. You can click on these to get more information about them and contribute your thoughts and feedback. So you can also see what features and functionality that we've got planned and working on, and also what has been released into the product here. And with that, that is all of the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So let me go ahead and get the slides up here for our agenda. And in the next 30 minutes or so, we want to cover some of the key findings from the State of GitOps report that we did earlier in the year. Actually, I think the survey started last year and then flowed into this year while we captured all of those survey results and then analyzed the data. So if you haven't done so already, you can go ahead and grab the State of GitOps report. We've got the short link there up on screen. And we want to talk about some of the crucial GitOps benefits that we found during our analysis of all of those survey results that came in, and then what we're actually seeing out there in the real world with customers. But most importantly of all, we actually are here to try and have a discussion. So Amit and I, we're very conversation-based. We just like to chat through things. So please go ahead and join in the chat. I can see Charlie has said good morning. Good morning to you as well, Charlie. Thanks for jumping on the stream. So who are we? My name is Matt Allford. I'm a developer advocate here at Octopus Deploy, and I'm super happy to be joined here by Amit. Did you want to introduce yourself to the folks?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Amit D'Souza, and I'm the founder and principal engineer at Odyssey Cloud. We help clients with platform engineering, GitOps, and Kubernetes both.
Awesome. And we are currently both based down here in Tasmania, the wonderful, beautiful island right off the bottom of mainland Australia. So our output is probably taking up the bass link at the moment with 2 streams going out. But anyhow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on the report itself, we had the goal of our research was really to understand what good GitOps looks like. And to do this, we had a bunch of different discussions with GitOps experts from around the world, understanding what are the things that we should look for. And we had a great round of responses. We had over 660 responses from really people across a lot of different industries all around the world, and with a range of geographies there coming in as well. So one of the key things that I think is important to base on when talking about doing anything with GitOps is that at opengitops.dev, there's a working group that has actually formed the GitOps principles. So there are 4 GitOps principles that you can see here on screen. And for me, they kind of rank in order. You're almost like a maturity, of starting out with GitOps and then getting through to being very mature with your GitOps processes. So I'm not going to read everything here on the screen, but the 4 principles themselves are to have for it to be declarative. So you, instead of being imperative and defining the steps that you want to achieve, you just want to declare the outcome that you want the GitOps engine to achieve. You want to have your code versioned and immutable. And then importantly, the system that is running your GitOps engine should be pulled automatically from that source control and then continuously reconciled with the target infrastructure. So usually that's going with GitOps. It's usually going to a Kubernetes cluster, not always though, but you want you want effectively what's in your Git repository to be the source of the truth, and then the engine sitting there and making sure that that is the desired state on your target infrastructure. Amit, I'm curious, what do you think of these principles? And when you go out there working with customers, some who are maybe getting started in GitOps, others who have started and are maturing in GitOps, like how important are these and how often do these come up?
I think these are very, very important, and it also is a very important part because part of the promotion, your GitOps version promotion, which is happening, is very dependent on these principles. Because if you can't consistently promote across your environments, if you don't follow these principles, there's a high chance that it's going to be iffy. You may or may not get the exact same version in your next environment up. So be that staging, be that prod, etc. And the second thing, what I found is one change about the pulled automatically. So for the higher environments, people care about pulled automatically, but for the lower environments, they want push too. That's another thing because developers are inherently impatient. They don't want to wait for the pull cycle to run. They are like, hey, I want, as soon as I push my code, I want our GitOps tool to start syncing.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're actually seeing a mix of it out there in the world. So for those earlier sort of ephemeral or dev environments where the developers are just wanting that super quick feedback, they're wanting just to push it straight through and get that immediately.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Not just that, I've also found that sometimes, so for testing purposes and all, they have found the UI of Argo CD is very handy to do a quick test. Like I want to test a different environment variable. What is the outcome of this different environment variable? Okay, I'm directly going to go into the manifest on the UI, test it out. If everything looks good, I'm going to go and add it to code. So it not only have I found that declarative is very handy, but I have found that the UI of Argo has helped massively in terms of getting more adoption and getting more engagement out of the developers, because they are like, yeah, I just wanted to change this value and it did not take me a 15-minute pipeline or a 10-minute pipeline where the whole thing needs to be rebuilt or however you are managing it. So that is something which is very gratifying to see when your developers are happy about certain implementations of your tooling.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, amazing. There's a lot of correlation with some of the findings that we'll bring up later in this report as well that kind of tie all that back together. So yeah, that totally makes sense. Now, what we did at Octopus when we went through this data, we started with those foundations. And on this screen here, you see 6 white boxes on the left-hand side there. And those are those 4 GitOps principles. We added a couple of others as well. It's interesting that you say that because responsive code review is one thing that we wanted to dig into a little bit because, as you say, developers in general are pretty impatient. I know I certainly am as well. And if you've submitted a code review to someone else, sitting there for hours, days, sometimes weeks is incredibly frustrating, right? So we want to make sure that the code review can be as quick as possible. And while that's by yourself in earlier environments, that's pretty straightforward. But then when you start to involve your team members is where that can potentially start to blow out as well. So what we wanted to understand here is we've got these 6 foundations of GitOps, or the 6 pillars there. And we know that on the right-hand side, there's an idealistic thing that we get to of organizational performance. That's why we're all here coming to work every day. We're trying to help our organizations do better in whatever that objective is. And then sort of in the middle there, there's 3 green boxes, which are software delivery performance, reliability, and well-being. And one of the key questions that we had was, do all of these GitOps things on the left-hand side make a difference to these DevOps things, the DevOps outcomes? And we know from other folks like Dora that those DevOps things in the middle there do have an impact on organizational performance. So sort of working backwards from that, we said, okay, if we want to make organizational performance better, we know these things help that from a DevOps outcome perspective. How do these GitOps things relate to the DevOps outcomes? And to try and understand this a bit better, through our survey, we asked obviously a number of different questions, and out of that, we were able to score people based on and give them a GitOps score. And so we scored people based on the practices that they were adopting. And we had a number of questions in the survey. Some of those questions were binary, like, are you doing X, Y, Z, yes or no? Whereas some of those other questions had sort of a sliding scale to them. So, but we were able to break every response down to have a GitOps score. And then we could correlate that GitOps score with software delivery performance, reliability, and well-being. So as we move through here, we're then able to plot that out on a very fancy looking graph. So we have in the x-axis here, these are scatter plots with regression lines. So on the x-axis down the bottom is the GitOps score that we gave folks who responded to the survey. And then on the y-axis, on the left-hand side, we've got well-being. And on the right-hand side, we've got reliability. So what we were able to see is the trend line shows the average relationship. If you were to put a dot here for every response that we got through, and then the line going through is the average, and then the shaded region there captures the real world variation. So the closer to that line the shaded area is, the more confident or the stronger correlation there was between those two things. So here we can see that there is, for both well-being and reliability, there is an upwards trend. So effectively, the higher your GitOps score, the higher the well-being and reliability. Now, well-being is an interesting one, and that has a little bit more variation than reliability. And we think that that's because there's a lot of things that can influence your well-being at work. It's things like your manager or your team, where you have to work, what your workload's like. These days, are you commuting to work when you don't want to be commuting? There's a lot of different factors that can play into well-being. While having a strong GitOps score might, or it does certainly feed into that, it's not every factor that feeds into well-being. Whereas reliability, there was a slightly stronger correlation. So Amit, what do you make of some of these numbers that we've got here and the trends that we're seeing?
The well-being completely makes sense, because initially when you begin your GitOps journey, you're now introduced to new principles, the new ways of working. You try and figure out how you take it from your lower environments to your higher environments. How do you manage this GitOps promotion, etc.? And initially, that can be overwhelming for a lot of teams who are not been on GitOps before, potentially not even been on Kubernetes before. So they are getting onboarded onto Kubernetes and GitOps at the same time. And there are all these different tools they are introduced to. So I can see why initially it would be exhausting. And you can see based on your graph that the number is low initially. But as you go closer to following the best principles of GitOps, your well-being increases from 40 to 60, which is a nice 20% jump. Because once you have configured all your promotion pipelines and you ensure that things are working a specific way, your life does become simple. Like, you don't have to be stressed about, hey, how do I ensure that this is going to go from dev to prod? Okay, the release that we did into production has an issue and it has caused certain failures. How do I roll back? It's literally you go onto Argo CD, roll back, and that's it. You don't have to go and find your pipeline then figure out, how do I roll back from there? Okay, we have a rollback pipeline on that particular one. Let's roll back from there. Your life does become much, much easier once you go down the path of GitOps. And same for reliability. Like, one thing to keep in mind that you have to ensure, if you're using a tool like Octopus Deploy, then Octopus will take care of it. But if you have deployed it locally, then you need to ensure that your Argo CD service is kept up to date, maintained well, and that will be directly tied to your GitOps and reliability of your application. Because if your tooling is not maintained, then your application can't be maintained. So I have definitely seen this correlation across multiple of my clients. Quite a few times they kind of get us in when they are overwhelmed at the initial stage. And that is part of the journey where we help them simplify their lives so that right at the beginning, they can move from 40 to 60 as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely seen that.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that's in well-being is, you touched on it as well. If organizations are, or engineers are getting introduced to Kubernetes and GitOps at the same time, like that's a lot, right? It's a lot to try and mentally just get through. And so I think it's important to have good training processes in place in your organization as well, and not just make the assumption that your engineers can keep up with the output that maybe they've been doing previously with technologies that they're familiar with. And there will be this learning curve that's required, as some of these things are adopted, the newer technologies. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
awesome. We had a question come in from Nathan. Good to see you, Nathan. Can you clarify lower environments versus higher environments? I think this was maybe where we were talking about like the lower environments being the earlier stage environments, sort of in the traditional environment progression. You might have development and then test and then UAT, staging, production, sort of those environments that flow upwards to production. I think that's what we're talking to with that terminology there. And we've got a question come in from Charlie as well. Would also love to hear about how GitOps can improve reliability in relation to testing, like flaky tests. Amit, do you have anything to touch on with this one?
I have. So I've actually been using TestCube. TestCube is basically, it has implemented tests within code as well as it follows GitOps principles. So if you use something like TestCube, I found it very handy. It simplifies the way you view tests. So previously, when the entire setup was run for one of my clients, they used to have the testing pipeline would basically be part of their entire GitLab workflow. And imagine trying to scour through all these different workflows to find which was the last pipeline that failed, how many tests failed, etc. Versus TestCube has this simplified UI where within one setup, you can see all your different tests that are running. So I personally found that has helped massively in terms of ensuring that while following GitOps principles, you are also implementing the test cases in a similar format. And that is applied across all your different applications within your system, which I found also improves reliability because you can derive correlation. So you can start seeing all your tests together. You can see the comparison. Hey, previously this was an issue, etc. But it's important to not just use GitOps, but also to use appropriate tooling for your use cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, do I need to then think about writing my tests in a different way, or can I continue writing a lot of the tests that I've got in the way that I have been for my application? Or is there a little bit of adaptation, maybe a little bit of both that needs to happen here?
I think as far as your tests are concerned, the tests were written in the same way. The only difference is how do you integrate them with a tool like TestCube. So you basically write a small little wrapper against some YAML, which basically imports all these different tests into a more GitOps friendly approach. So that's where you would find this is very helpful. So we found that once we started implementing TestCube is again open source. So you have an enterprise version and the open source, you can pick and choose whichever you want. Again, it goes back to one requires maintenance. You can't just ignore your tooling. But if you want to improve your reliability and see how GitOps is helping with that, TestCube is a wonderful tool to start with, where all you need to write is the small integration piece, and all your old tests will just get onboarded onto this framework for you.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks for the questions. Let me jump back here. Sorry, I'm driving by myself on a smaller screen. There we go. So the next one that we had, or the third piece that we wanted to correlate things to, was the software delivery performance. So that is really leaning on DORA's 4 keys, or the DORA metrics: time to restore, deployment frequency, lead time for changes, and change failure rate. So we were able to, again, take the GitOps score of folks that responded and then correlate that here to how they're doing with software delivery, basically. And this one was really interesting. There is obviously a really strong correlation on this one. The shaded areas are nice and tight in there with the line as well, which means that this graph did plot pretty much that way. So we rated this quite a large finding in our report. And Is this, Amit, do GitOps practices directly improve these key DevOps outcomes, like the four core?
100%.
Yep, there we go.
100%. What I've found is basically your deployment frequency, your lead time, your change failure rate, all of it gets impacted once you start implementing GitOps. You find an improvement in all of them. You might initially, while you're fine tuning your configuration, while you're figuring out how to do your promotions, you might find it getting slightly worse before it gets better. So till you implement all the important GitOps principles, you will find you will, for a short period, be worse off till you're way better off. So don't be surprised that at the initial phases, when you're just introducing GitOps to your organization, you might find that it gets slightly worse. But as soon as you implement all the 4 GitOps principles, you'll find it getting drastically better, where all your DORA scores goes up, your failure rates go down. It's easier to roll back. You are simplifying your whole process, and not only that, your developers get a good overview of how your applications are running. Whereas previously for them, it's running on Kubernetes, and I don't necessarily need to know the rest.
Yeah, that's and that's what we see. For those who have gone and read the State of GitOps report, or might go and read it, we saw that time and time again with a lot of the benefits of GitOps. There was almost this, that you could actually see the learning curve at the start of, but if you can push through that learning curve, then it really sort of J curves up on the other side, and that increase in many areas is definitely there. So that's really exciting that's what you see out in the real world as well. Now for these, or effectively what we came to the conclusion of then was these GitOps things on the left-hand side do make a difference to these DevOps things that are in the middle, which therefore has a positive impact on organizational performance. So there can sometimes be a lot that's required to get into GitOps. It's obviously heavily reliant on the applications that you're developing and deploying, but we definitely saw a strong correlation here with those 3 different areas or the DevOps outcomes as well. So with that said, I'm going to change screen here and just jump to a screen share that I've got. And we have made, I say we, but Steve Fenton, I can't take any credit for this. Steve here at Octopus Deploy has made an interactive diagram here. I'll put a link in the chat to this one soon. But what this goes to show is we had those areas on the left-hand side, the GitOps practices, and then the DevOps outcomes on the right-hand side. So the way that this chart works is, if there's a correlation between the GitOps practice on the left-hand side and the DevOps outcome, there will be a line between those 2 things. And the stronger the line, the more important that finding was. Or sorry, let me have a look here. The stronger the relationship, the thicker the line. So the way this works is you can almost work this one backwards. So if you wanted to really look at improving your software delivery performance, this is interactive, so you can click on it here. And now you can see, okay, we've got 4 things on the left-hand side that directly correlate to an increase in software delivery performance. And then the thickness of the line might give you an indication on where to start first in your organization. So declarative desired state and responsive code review there both have really strong lines between those 2 things. So that might be a good area to reflect on. If you're trying to increase your software delivery performance and your code review is an average of, 3 days, then that could be a really key area for you to start. And there's, of course, different things that you can unpack there on the left-hand side with each of these different things. But instead of looking at all of this stuff and just sort of saying to yourself, where do I start? We find this gives you a good lens on, okay, these are the things I want to improve, and these are where to start as well. Amit, do you find that this is an exercise that you go through with a lot of customers as well? Instead of just trying to adopt everything and do it all in day one?
Yeah, I've actually used your workflow, this particular screen which you're sharing right now. I've used it before when I'm talking to clients, and it's been very helpful for them. So I pretty much use the same thing which Steve Fenton has created, right? Where rather than me rewriting this whole thing, I'm like, hey, check out what Octopus says here. And if you want to improve your software delivery performance, you need to basically do these 5 different things. And some of them are more important than others, as you can see, as you mentioned, right? Thick lines indicate what are more important and has a higher correlation to it. So as you mentioned, if your developers are taking 3 days to respond, you need to go back to the scratch code and figure out why it is why is it taking 3 days in the first place. Because no matter how much GitOps you do, your cycle or your speed to delivery is not going to increase if a PR takes 3 days. Like you could do all the GitOps you want, but if your PR is going to take 3 days to get approved, your delivery cycle is going to stay slow. No matter how fantastic we make our promotional patterns, how we ensure everything is full, security is taken care of, but it's still going to take you 3 days. So
Yep.
I think declarative desired state is very important because people can then see what changes have been made. This is helpful not only for software, but also for infrastructure. So if you use a tool, if you're on Terraform and you use a tool like Atlantis, or if you're on Crossplane, then you don't need to worry about the yesterways of Terraform. You will find that declarative desired state is one of the best ways to define not only your application, but also your infrastructure, because you know exactly how you get to see it at the end, and ensuring that your developers are always on, ensuring that they review their PRs on time, ensure that things get merged on time is going to help your delivery cycle way more than any GitOps, any of the other GitOps principles are going to help you in.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to me to see some of these, but when you sit down and sort of think it through, it's like, okay, yep, that actually does make sense, you know, and it's sort of some of the foundational stuff that we can sometimes overlook or forget when we're going through some of these processes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the only part which I found was slightly different, where initially I had done automatic pull across all environments, and I actually got clients who were like, hey, you know, the dev environment, we got to wait for the polling to happen, then it gets synced. Can we work around that? So that is the only one which I found where most of my clients asked me to flip that for the dev environment to make it push based. So that is the only thing which I would highlight here based on this graph.
Awesome. That's a great finding for sure. And as we jump back to the slides here, so what we found in our report was that it wasn't just the DevOps outcomes that were, you know, great things out of adopting GitOps, but we also were able to correlate these 5 benefits that came out of GitOps. So when we were building the survey, we asked a lot of people why they would adopt GitOps. You know, what is it that makes you want to adopt GitOps in your organization? And then we're able to use that during the survey to test the theory. You know, is that actually a benefit of GitOps? And here you can see the numbers. These are the averages across respondents, but we did find that GitOps is more auditable. It prevents configuration drift. Compliance and audits are easier. There are fewer people who need elevated access to target infrastructure because we're now driving that all through version control and Git, and it also increases security. And what was interesting was coming back to the GitOps score that we had before. If we look at the group of people who we categorized as high performers, their percentages here were actually higher than these on every single account. So that sort of drives back to your point before about sort of the more of those GitOps fundamentals that you can embrace, and the more that you do in your environment, the more benefits you will get for things like this here on the screen. And so very quickly, we've seen one of the graphs, but I'm going to jump back to the screen share and also show that on this same page, if you scroll up a little bit, we have another graph which is correlating those things. So we've got the 5 benefits on the right-hand side, and again, the practices on the left-hand side. And this is the same graph. So again, if you wanted to look at, you know, if one of your key drivers for using GitOps was for increasing security in your environment, you can sort of go to the benefit on the right-hand side, click on that, and then see which of the practices directly correlate to that outcome. So I have shared this link in the chat. Go ahead and check it out. Like I say, I can't take any credit for it, but these are fantastic diagrams and very easy to understand. So thanks, Steve, for going through the effort of building those.
Yeah. I've also found this extension called ephemeral access within Argo CD, which helps within escalating your privileges and reducing your privileges whenever required, and it's all temporary. So if that is something which you all are considering in terms of security, that I want to very tightly restrict who has access to what, maybe that's extension that you all take a look at and consider.
Yeah, excellent. That's really cool, because one of the things that I found interesting, and I dug into in a blog post actually, was around elevated access to target environments, but then also thinking about, okay, if everything's moved into Git and GitOps, like it's kind of moved the security boundary, right? From, okay, we can lock down that target infrastructure now so people can't log in with a command line and run kubectl commands or whatever it might be. But do we now need to think about securing those access controls, somewhere else in this sort of software delivery pipeline? Have we moved the entry point into our production environment, and how is that now being controlled and managed with role-based access control? So
yeah, so I found this extension has been quite helpful in terms of certain developers having most of the time they have read-only permissions on production environments, and if they require, then they would use ephemeral access to temporarily get higher privileges in order to perform certain actions which they need to. So whether it's currently a P1, that say your application has P1, and you need developers to go and check specific logs rather than just extracting it, or the developer is curious that, hey, 5 of my pods are responding with the appropriate data, but the 6th pod is getting incorrect data. So I only want to figure out and see what might be different there. So this would help in such a scenario. Obviously, we have tools like Grafana, etc., to view these logs, but sometimes it's easier to see when you want to really go into the system and see, hey, what are the different components I have there? What are the resources I have? The visualization really helps, and ephemeral access helps within the fact of ensuring that certain developers can get certain elevated permissions, but temporarily only. And that's how we would manage it.
Yeah, awesome. The level of granularity there sounds like it's really beneficial as well. So very cool. All right, I know we're coming up to time here, so we'll start to wrap things up in the next few minutes. And let me go ahead and just jump back into the slides real quick. I think we are almost on the last one. So in our report, we also looked at or asked folks what their plans were for GitOps in the future. And we saw that 68% plan to use GitOps more, 25% plan to stay where they are with GitOps, and interestingly, 7% plan to reduce or stop GitOps. And I know you asked me a few weeks ago when you saw this number, why is that? And we saw a very strong correlation between the 7% who plan to stop the GitOps having not adopted all of those GitOps principles. So they would typically have started with declarative state and version control, but they sort of didn't move through from there. And this kind of ties back to your point before, where at the start you'll probably see some learning, some frustration, some time being spent trying to understand how this new process, this new model, this new way of developing software works, before you start to see some of the benefits. So yeah, it was interesting that we had a direct correlation there with those who were planning to stop, having not brought on those full GitOps principles. So
no, that totally makes sense, right? That's where you need to basically call in some experts who can train you or walk through like a lot of training, because it's always the initial phase. Whether you go to the gym, you're not going to grow biceps like Arnold on day one and be like, why are my biceps so tiny? Or if you're trying to run a marathon, you're not just going to get out and be like, okay, I'm going to run the Sydney Marathon tomorrow. like Barney Stinson does in How I Met Your Mother.
That's right. There's one step to a marathon. You start running and there is no step 2. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't do that. You can't expect results on day one. You have to ensure that you are following certain best practices, that you are following all the principles. And I think the workflow that you showed, or that graph that you showed, the interactive graph, is going to help a lot of people massively in terms of deciding where am I on this journey.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that's as helpful for engineers that it is for like leaders of teams as well, right? Because if as an organization you're going down the GitOps path for a reason, like you've learned about it, you've heard about it, you've seen some of the benefits maybe, and you've got particular reasons for wanting to go down that path, and being able to pick apart the areas that you should focus on to get to the outcomes, the reasons why you went to it quickly, is going to be better for everyone, because your team is going to be able to show to the business, hey, we invested in this, and here's the direct correlation. We've been able to improve our software delivery, where our environments are more reliable, or we're more secure, whatever it is. So without sort of picking that apart and figuring out the why we're doing this, and then what are the practices that feed into that, I think it can be that's where it can start to be troubling and really difficult for folks to unpick where to focus in their environment.
And your security team will thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Which doesn't happen very often, right? So, yeah.
Normally they are like, hey, you have all these issues, but GitOps is one of the few times where your security team is like, thank you, this is really handy. I can really see what you're going to have in production right at the get-go, and I'm not worried that if someone decides to make a change manually. So one of the best ways to describe it is public access buckets. And if you use something like Crossplane or ACK for performing your actions, if someone manually goes and makes it public access, it will get reverted. How handy is that? Like, wouldn't all security teams be like super ecstatic about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. And that's pretty much it. So thanks, folks. I know we've run a little bit over the scheduled 30 minutes there, but hopefully you've found some of the information here or just the discussion beneficial as well. And I think we've gone ahead and captured all of the comments in the chat. Charlie says, thanks very much. And have a lovely day in Tas. My window's shut there. You can't see it. I was going to show off the sunshine, but there is no sunshine out there today, unfortunately. So I've gone ahead and closed the window. But if you want to get in touch with us, we are both keen to keep this discussion going. It wasn't a jump on here and talk at people. That's not how either of us operate. So we would love to connect with you. Some of our details are down here. LinkedIn is probably the easiest and best place for both of us. You will see both of us at all sorts of different events here, both in Australia and New Zealand and across the world as well. So if you see one of us out in the wild, please do come up and say hello. We would, if there's more things to discuss, please send some questions through. We'd love to have another one of these. Maybe we can do a follow-up webinar in the new year if there's some different questions or angles that come through from folks. So please do feel free to send things through. Amit, do you have any closing thoughts before we end it?
Follow the principles.
Absolutely. Key takeaway from today is follow the principles, and that is the path to success, right? So that is, I think, a great note to end things on. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. Thanks for those folks who have jumped in the chat, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Ciao.